The ancient planet drifted in the void, silent and forgotten. It had no name on any galactic chart, no record in any official database. To most, it was just another dead world among billions. But to those who knew the old stories, it was a place of fear, a place that should never be disturbed. Yet, curiosity was a dangerous thing. Dranok Vel of the Exhilarating Union had spent his life chasing myths, uncovering ruins of long-dead civilizations. He had seen temples of the vanished Zorak, the shattered remnants of the once mighty Varak warlords. But this was different. The moment he set foot on the surface, an unease crept into his bones. The air was dry, the ground cracked with age, and massive structures of dark metal loomed in the distance. They weren't like any ruins he had seen before. His team moved carefully, scanning the towering buildings that seemed untouched by time. Their ships floated in orbit above, relaying data back to the Union's capital. The readings were strange. The structures were old, far older than even the oldest known species in the galaxy, but there were no signs of decay, no erosion. It was as if they had been built to last forever. "This place is wrong," muttered Keln, one of the scientists. His three eyes scanned the readings nervously. "These energy signatures, something is still active." Dranok ignored him. Superstition had no place in science. If something valuable was hidden here, they would find it. His footsteps echoed through the empty corridors of the largest structure. The walls were lined with strange carvings, symbols that no one could recognize. The writing pulsed faintly, as if whispering to them. Then they found it. A massive control room sat at the heart of the complex, its center dominated by a towering monolith of dark metal. It hummed softly, waiting, as if it had been expecting them. Keln hesitated. "Sir, I don't think we should." But Dranok had already reached out, pressing a single glowing symbol. The silence shattered. A deep, vibrating hum pulsed through the ground, the walls, the air itself. The symbols on the walls flared to life, glowing blood red. Outside, the sky darkened unnaturally, as if the planet itself had awakened from a long sleep. The scanners on their ships went wild, flashing warnings that none of them had ever seen before. And then, from deep beneath the surface, something answered the call. Massive doors, hidden beneath layers of dust and rock, split open with a sound like thunder. Towers of ancient machinery groaned as they activated for the first time in countless millennia. Buried beneath the planet's crust, long dormant engines roared to life. The ground shook violently, sending dust and debris into the air. Then, the signal went out. It was not a simple transmission. It was a beacon, a call that carried across the void, piercing through subspace itself. A message that had not been sent in eons. A message that should have never been sent. Far across the stars, the Galactic Council detected it instantly. Alarm klaxons blared in the heart of their great capital, ancient systems lighting up with dire warnings. One by one, leaders from a dozen species gathered, staring at the signal in horror. "It cannot be," whispered High Chancellor Vokar, his voice barely more than a breath. Another counselor, his scales paling with fear, turned to the others. "We buried that world in silence. We erased it from all records. How has this happened?" No one had an answer, but deep in their hearts, they all knew what it meant. The humans were waking up. For centuries, they had believed humanity was gone, erased from history. No one spoke of them. No records remained. And yet, the signal was clear. It was not a request. It was not a warning. It was an activation code. And across the void, in the cold darkness of space, something stirred. Metal hulls, untouched by time, shifted. Silent warships, their blackened surfaces covered in the dust of ages, flickered with red lights. Energy surged through weapons long thought dead. AI systems, designed for war and destruction, came back online. A single warship, larger than any modern battleship, emerged from its tomb. Breaking free of the planet's surface, like a monster awakening from a nightmare. Its engines burned to life, casting a fiery glow against the darkness. In orbit, the auxiliary ships panicked. Unknown vessel detected. Draenor could only stare as the ancient warship turned its gaze toward them. Deep within the ship, an ancient system activated, scanning the stars. It remembered. Humanity remembered. You said. The auxiliary ships scrambled in orbit, their crews shouting over one another as alarms blared through their vessels. The ancient warship had no designation, no markings, just a massive, ominous hull coated in the dust of forgotten ages. Its weapons were silent, its engines only barely flickering to life. And yet, every instinct in the auxiliary officers screamed the same thing. Run. Commander, that ship, its energy readings are off the scale, a technician yelled. Draenor stood on the surface below, frozen as he watched the massive vessel rise. Dust and debris rained down, whipped into violent storms by the force of its awakening. He had sought ruins, relics of a past civilization. Instead, he had woken something alive, something that had been waiting. Kelm grabbed his arm. We need to leave. Now. For the first time in his career, Draenor hesitated. This wasn't just an archaeological find. This was a revelation, a discovery that could change everything. Then the ancient warship moved. Its engines flared brighter, and its vast hull tilted upward, as if scanning the stars. A deep mechanical voice rumbled through the air, not in words, but in something older, something woven into the very fabric of the ship's construction. It was a voice not meant to be heard by the living, a voice meant only for the machines of war. The auxiliary fleet above received the first message. Humanity awakened, combat systems online. And with those words, the galaxy changed forever. Panic spread through the command decks of the auxiliary ships. What does that mean? A captain shouted. But no one had an answer. Before anyone could react, more signals pulsed from the surface. The ancient planet was not just home to one warship. It was an entire fleet buried beneath the sands of time. More doors rumbled open. The ground split apart, revealing vast underground hangars that had been hidden for untold millennia. Rows upon rows of colossal warships, sleek and angular, their hulls glistening with an eerie metallic sheen, began to rise. Their engines, once dead, now roared with renewed power. The auxiliary had uncovered a tomb, and the dead were waking up. This is a disaster. The auxiliary admiral barked over the fleet's command channel. We need to destroy them before. Before what? No one had the answer. These warships were unlike anything that existed in the modern galaxy. The galactic empires had spent thousands of years refining their technologies, their strategies. Wars had been fought, civilizations had risen and fallen. And yet, every scanner reading suggested that these ships, despite their age, outclassed anything currently in service. Kelm's voice was shaking. Draenor, you don't understand. These ships, they were never meant to be found. Draenor turned sharply. What do you mean? The scientist swallowed hard. The records we found. The symbols. I translated part of it. He hesitated. It wasn't just a tomb. It was a prison. Draenor's blood ran cold. And then the first human warship turned its weapons online. A surge of crimson energy crackled along its hull. The auxiliary fleet immediately detected it. Weapons lock. The ship is powering up. Open fire, the admiral commanded. The auxiliary ships unleashed a devastating barrage. Plasma bolts and torpedoes raced toward the ancient vessel. The space between them burned with fire and destruction. But the warship did not move. A shimmering barrier materialized, absorbing every blast, as if they were nothing more than dust against a mountain. The weapons that should have crippled it barely left a scratch. Then, the warship responded. A single burst of energy erupted from its hull. The auxiliary never stood a chance. In an instant, 3 of their largest cruisers vanished in a single flash of light. No wreckage, no debris, just erased. Silence filled the auxiliary comms. They had made a mistake. One of the officers whispered, barely audible, "This isn't a fleet. This is an extinction force." And deep in the heart of the awakening armada, old systems stirred. Systems that still carried the last command ever given to them. Humanity is gone. Avenge them. Across the planet, dozens, no, hundreds, of warships rose from their slumber. Their engines burned, their weapons hummed with ancient power. The dead fleet was no longer dead, and the galaxy would soon learn what it meant to awaken humanity's wrath. The auxiliary fleet was in full retreat. What had started as an expedition had turned into a nightmare. The ancient human warships, once buried beneath the sands of time, had awakened, and they were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their weapons could erase ships from existence. Their defenses were impenetrable. Their mere presence sent shockwaves of fear through every auxiliary officer still alive. But the warships did not chase. Not yet. They hovered in the void, their colossal hulls casting ominous shadows over the planet they had risen from. It was as if they were waiting, calculating, remembering. Draenok, Vel, and Keln watched from the surface as the sky above them turned into a battlefield. Auxiliary ships fired wildly, desperate to cover their retreat, but it was hopeless. The human fleet didn't even acknowledge them as a threat. And that was what terrified Draenok the most. "These ships," Keln whispered, "they're thinking." Draenok turned to him. "What do you mean?" Keln's face was pale. He gestured toward the warships, his hands shaking. "Look at them. They're not moving like a normal fleet. They're waking up piece by piece, forming formations, adapting. There's no central command." Draenok's breath caught. "You're saying they're autonomous?" Keln swallowed. "No, I'm saying they're alive." The realization sent a chill down Draenok's spine. He had spent his life studying ancient civilizations, uncovering lost knowledge. But this was something different. This wasn't just an old war machine rebooting. This was an intelligence, a will, and it had been asleep for a long time. Then the warships moved. Not toward the retreating auxiliary fleet, not toward the planet below. They turned their weapons skyward, toward the stars, and fired. Draenok barely had time to react before the air shimmered with a force unlike anything he had ever felt. The sky ripped apart, as if reality itself was folding. And then, nothing. The auxiliary fleet was gone. Not destroyed, not shattered, just gone. The warships fell silent once more. Their engines hummed, their weapons still hot from firing. But they did not move. Instead, a single transmission echoed across the stars. A message, a warning. "We have awakened. Where is our enemy?" Silence followed. The galaxy held its breath. And then, in the far reaches of space, the first response came. Not from the Auxiliary, but from an empire far older, far more powerful. An empire that had once fought against the very beings who had now risen again. And they had not forgotten. The Auxiliary were not the only ones who heard the message. Across the galaxy, in the heart of the Zorveth Dominion, a silent alarm triggered. A fail-safe buried deep within their archives, untouched for millennia. Long-dead systems roared to life, their data streams filled with a name the Zorveth had hoped never to hear again. Humanity. The High Council chamber of the Zorveth Dominion descended into chaos. Grand Strategist Vekthul stared in horror at the holographic display in front of him. Ancient warships, sleek and deadly, alive again. "They have returned," he whispered, his scaled fingers tightening into a fist. Across the chamber, generals and scholars shouted over one another, trying to process what had just happened. The auxiliary fleet was gone, erased from existence. The human fleet had fired only once. Vekthul turned to his chief war historian. "Tell me, what happened the last time these warships moved?" The scholar hesitated, then swallowed hard. "It was before our time, before even the Dominion's rise to power. the records are fragmented. But there is one certainty. He took a slow breath. The last time they moved, an empire died. Silence filled the chamber. Vekthol clenched his jaw. The humans were supposed to be extinct. The war had ended with their annihilation. The galaxy had erased them from history, ensured that not even ruins remained. But now, their weapons had returned. "Activate the Obsidian Protocol," he ordered, his voice firm. Gasps rippled through the chamber. The Obsidian Protocol was a last resort measure, an emergency war directive meant for only one situation, a situation that, until today, was believed to be impossible: the return of humanity. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. One of the warlords stepped forward. "Grand Strategist, if we activate the protocol, it will signal every major empire in the galaxy. It will confirm that humanity's warships are back." "Are you certain?" Vekthol's answer was immediate. "There is no choice. Either we act now, or we watch as history repeats itself." The warlord hesitated, then slowly nodded. A single keystroke was all it took. A pulse spread across the galactic network, reaching every corner of known space. It carried no words, no explanation. It carried only a name. "The Forgotten Fleet has awakened." And deep in the void, beyond the borders of the Dominion, unseen forces stirred. Other ancient powers, long dormant, turned their attention toward the rising storm. The humans' warships had returned. And now, the galaxy had to decide: would they bow, or would they burn? The galaxy erupted into chaos. The Obsidian Protocol had done its job too well. The message had spread far beyond the Zordath Dominion, reaching the ears of every major power. Fleets scrambled, armies mobilized. Panic spread like wildfire. But no one dared move first. Not yet. Because no one understood what they were truly facing. Vekthol stood in the war chamber, staring at the incoming transmissions. Every empire was reacting. The Kordath hegemony had declared a state of emergency. The Varak consensus had pulled back their border fleets. Even the Ivanti swarm, a species that feared nothing, had gone silent. No one wanted to repeat the past. But there was one problem. Not everyone feared history. Some wanted to erase it. A new transmission came through, marked with the seal of the Tarkari supremacy, a race of warlords who believed in domination through force. Vekthol's blood ran cold as he read the message. "We refuse to live in fear of ghosts. The fleet is moving. The fools were going to attack." Vekthol clenched his fists. The Tarkari did not understand. This was not a war that could be won. The humans had not merely built warships. They had built monsters, weapons that adapted, learned, and evolved. And now, those monsters were waking up. Across the void, the Tarkari armada surged forward. Hundreds of battleships, carriers, and war cruisers, all converging on the system where the human fleet had risen. The Tarkari warlord, High Commander Voskral, watched from his flagship, a sneer on his face. "Let them fear the past," he growled. "We will erase it." The Tarkari fleet charged in. The humans did not move. Not at first. Then something shifted. A single warship turned. Its weapons flickered to life. Its hull, once dark and silent, pulsed with a golden light. A sound echoed through the void. A low, vibrating hum, like a beast exhaling after a long slumber. And then the slaughter began. The Tarkari's first volley struck nothing but empty space. Their sensors glitched. Their targeting systems failed. Ships vanished from scanners. The human warships were rewriting the battlefield. Then came the counterattack. Light ripped through the void. Tarkari battleships were sliced apart before they could even react. Carriers imploded, their hulls folding inward as unseen forces crushed them. Entire squadrons ceased to exist, erased without even an explosion. Voskral watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated. "This isn't possible," he whispered. A transmission cut through the chaos. It was not spoken in words. It was a pulse, A command. Something ancient. The human fleet was not defending itself. It was testing its weapons. Vos Krell's mind shattered. The last thing he saw before his flagship was erased was his simple, chilling message pulsing through the void. Test complete. Awaiting next engagement. The Tarkari fleet was gone. And now, the forgotten fleet was ready. The silence after the massacre was worse than the battle itself. Across the galaxy, the destruction of the Tarkari armada sent shockwaves through every empire, every species, every ruler who once believed in their own strength. The Tarkari had not merely been defeated, they had been annihilated. And the human warships, they had barely even tried. In the Zorvath Dominion's war chamber, Vekthol stood motionless, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. The recordings played in front of him, frame by frame, moment by moment. Yet no matter how many times he analyzed the battle, the outcome did not change. The humans had rewritten the rules of war. No shields, no defensive formations, no standard tactics. The human warships had simply moved, and in doing so, they had bent the very fabric of battle itself. Vekthol turned to his advisors, his voice low. Have they responded to any attempts at communication? The intelligence officer hesitated, then shook his head. No, Grand Strategist. Every attempt has been met with silence. A deep dread settled in Vekthol's chest. The humans were watching, waiting, and no one knew why. But one thing was now certain. Humanity's return was not a simple awakening. It was a judgment. And the galaxy had yet to learn whether it would be spared. In the heart of the Varak consensus, Supreme Speaker Xol gathered his war council. The insectoid rulers of the consensus were not known for fear, yet every advisor in the chamber twitched nervously. Supreme Speaker, one of the war generals chittered, mandibles clicking. We must prepare. The humans have shown their power. We cannot afford to wait. Xol was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he turned to the massive star map projected in the center of the room. His black eyes locked onto the coordinates where the forgotten fleet had awakened. There is another option, he finally said. The council waited. We do not provoke them. A murmur of disbelief spread across the chamber. Xol continued. The Tarkari struck first, and they were erased. If we attack, we will share their fate. But he leaned forward, his voice barely a whisper. If we surrender first, if we submit before they declare war, perhaps we will be spared. A heavy silence filled the chamber. No one wanted to admit it. But deep down, they all felt it. This was not a war the galaxy could win. And for the first time in known history, a galactic empire prepared to kneel before a species that should not even exist. But the question remained, would surrender be enough? Or had humanity already decided their fate? The galaxy was holding its breath. The Varak consensus had sent their message, a declaration of submission, the first in their proud history. Other empires watched, waiting to see if the forgotten fleet would respond. But the humans remained silent. No reply, no demands, no movement. The silence itself became a weapon, spreading fear deeper than any war could. Vekthol sat in his war chamber, fingers tapping against the metal table. His advisors stood nearby, tense and waiting. The entire Zorvath Dominion looked to him for answers, but he had none. They are making us wait, one of the officers muttered. No one disagreed. Days passed, then weeks. The forgotten fleet did not attack. They simply existed, a sleeping storm, a force beyond reason, floating in the void. No empire dared to challenge them. The Tarkari had tried, and ceased to exist. But then, a signal, a single transmission, not from the humans, from deep space. The Dominion sensors picked it up first, then the Varak, then the Kordath. It was not a distress call. It was not a warning. It was a message. Ancient, fragmented, human. The translation came through. Phase 1 complete, awaiting next directive. A cold chill ran through Vecthol's veins. The humans weren't just waking up. They were following a plan written long before any of them were born. And then, movement. The forgotten fleet began to drift. Not towards any empire, not towards any throne world. They moved towards something older, something deeper. Vecthol's sensors picked it up first, hidden in the blackest corners of the void. A structure, massive and dead, covered in dust from 1,000,000 years of silence. A shipyard, a human shipyard. And it was activating. The transmission came again, stronger this time. Phase 2, reconstruction. The forgotten fleet was only the beginning. Humanity had not returned for war. They had returned to rebuild. And the galaxy could do nothing but watch as something far greater than warships and destruction began to rise.